Good evening, good afternoon, good morning. We are about to start in 1 or 2 minutes. Or we should have an intro music. But I'm not going to sing. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, everyone. Welcome to this third session of the Digital Air Cargo Forum organized by TIACA. This one is Airports4Cargo. We are going to talk about the central role airports are playing for cargo, for their communities, for the local economies, and the ecosystem that is on the cargo side. We have the support today of ACI World, which is the Association of Airports, Airport Council International, to organize this session. And I have really a fantastic lineup of speakers. I'm very, very happy to have you all. The session will be driven and moderated by Steven Polmans, the Director of Cargo and Logistics for Brussels Airport, but also the Chair of TIACA's board. So obviously, the role of Airports4Cargo is very close to his heart. So he will be the best person to lead that session. I would like to introduce you to the two main speakers today before we go into the panel discussion that Steven will moderate. Soufiane Daher from NACO. Soufiane will talk about how air cargo adds value to airports. Very interesting presentation, Soufiane. Looking forward to that. And then Thomas van Hasch, and I hope I'm pronouncing well, postdoc researcher at University of Antwerp about the air cargo competitiveness on airports. So that would be the two keynote speech and presentation to really start the discussion around really the value of cargo for airports, moderated by Steven Polmans, as I said, with Vivian Low, Executive Director of Hactel in Hong Kong, Steven Verhasselt, the VP Commercial for Liège Airport, that is based in Hong Kong today and not in Liège. Patrick Fehring, the Director Aero Business for Rio International Airport, and Ylva Arvidsson, Director Cargo for Swedavia Airport. So really a good panel, good speakers. I'm very looking forward to hear more about you. And I'd like to give the floor first to Soufiane for your presentation on how air cargo adds value to airports. Soufiane, the floor is yours.
Celine, can I quickly add one thing? I'm really sorry to interrupt, but to everybody listening, if you have questions in the meantime, start using the Q&A box, because we will keep the questions for the panel discussion and not do them after the presentations. But please do start writing down your questions already, and we will take them with us to the next panel discussion. So thanks for that.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Celine. Thank you, Stephen. Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning, wherever you are, and welcome to this presentation about the role of cargo for airports and the value it brings. So I would like to present some key facts and concepts to fuel the discussion amongst the panel coming later. So without further ado, let's begin. First of all, just a quick catch up on some of the key trends impacting the air cargo industry right now in terms of opportunities and challenges, or challenges and opportunities, however you would like to look at it. Basically, it's a mix of trends that have been taking place before the crisis and were accelerated by the COVID-19 crisis, such as the growth of e-commerce that has been above all expectations this year, and other trends that are new and that we have to deal with, such as the challenge of distributing the COVID-19 vaccines. So we'll discuss these trends during the presentation today, but really the point is, what is the role of the airports in responding to these trends? So as we explore this question, I would like to introduce a model to assess the value that cargo brings to airports. And we see that in three different levels. First of all, the financial value to the airport, and that comes in the form of land and facilities rent, as well as the aeronautical revenue of the landing and parking fees of the freighter flights. And then if we move beyond that, there is also a strategic value in the form of the contribution that cargo brings to the customers of the airport, being the airlines, as well as the customers of the customers, being the freight forwarders and the shippers. So there's a strategic value here that is a little bit less tangible, but important nonetheless. And finally, if we look beyond that, there's an economic value whereby cargo is an engine for developing local industries and the broader logistics sectors, but also in attracting new industries and new companies that would like to be located somewhere because of the air cargo capabilities that are provided. So that certainly has a positive impact on the economy. So the point here is that even though the financial value is, let's say, the most tangible or the one that we can measure more accurately, it doesn't mean that it's the most impactful. In fact, you could argue that the strategic value and the economic value may have bigger potential, bigger impact on the airport and its surrounding. So for that, let us go through these three one by one, starting with the financial value. And what we have here is a breakdown of the airport's revenue before the crisis in very diverse type of revenue streams. And as you can imagine, what the crisis has actually highlighted is that airports are traditionally reliant on passenger traffic, as well as on aeronautical revenue. And that is illustrated by the fact that passenger charges make up a quarter of the revenue on average, and landing and parking charges add another 13% to that. So the question is, what is cargo's contribution in this revenue base? Well, cargo provide some contribution to the landing and parking charges, but that is somehow limited given the fact that cargo movement represent only 2% of total movements on average. And then if we move on to the terminal rentals and the real estate here, cargo can provide somehow a significant impact because there's a lot of facilities, whether at the airport or in the surrounding of the airport, that are directly attributed to the air cargo activity. And then finally, there's some contribution in the form of ground handling charges and miscellaneous cargo charges that the airports might charge. But all in all, cargo may represent, let's say, only around 10% or even less than that of the airport's revenue on average. So when I say on average, of course, there are extreme cases. Some of the large cargo hubs out there, like Memphis or Louisville, will have a very high portion of their revenue directly attributed to cargo. So I think in the case of Memphis, it's around half the revenues that directly come from cargo. But on average worldwide, it is around, let's say, 10%. It is comparable to the revenue coming from car parking concessions. So does that mean that cargo has somehow a limited value? Well, we don't think so. First of all, because in the context of the current crisis, every way that we can diversify the revenue base will help the airport. So every little bit helps. And secondly, like I said, because we have to look beyond the financial value. So that brings us to the strategic value. And the point here is that cargo is ever so important to airlines. As I'm sure you know, cargo is forecast to represent 26% of the airline's revenue this year, which is a considerable growth from last year. And that is also illustrated in these quotes from two passenger airlines, actually. Virgin Atlantic, that is saying that they're actually making money on flights that are only 20% full of passengers, but 100% full of cargo. And you might think that this is somehow temporary because right now the cargo yields are very high. But if we remember that cargo traffic may, let's say, recover faster than the passenger traffic, well, we can expect that for the years to come, there will be a disconnect between the two. So there's going to be a need for cargo capacity. So that means that cargo is going to continue to remain important to airlines. That is also illustrated in the move that Air Canada is making, which is basically going into dedicated freighters to capitalize on the e-commerce trend. So that is somehow a more lasting strategy that they have decided to go for. So the point is, and we knew that cargo is important to airlines even before the crisis, and now it is even more important, and we can expect that to continue. And basically, if cargo is important to airlines, it should be important to the airports as well, because airlines are the customers of the airports, of course. And yeah, that's something that airlines are taking seriously. And last but not least, if we move to the economic value, what we have here is an example of a trans-Pacific cargo flight that we're looking at it from the perspective of a North American airport. And this flight adds between 30 and 60 jobs as a mix of the direct employment, the indirect, and the induced type of employment. It adds between $7 and $12 million of economic output, which is not negligible considering this is one single flight we're looking at. And it adds between $2 and $4 million in wages. So this is just an example to say that the economic value of cargo can be quite significant. But it matters a lot. It depends a lot on where we are and what kind of airport are we looking at. So some of the factors that drive this economic value are outlined here. Basically, the structure of the local economy. How much is it enabled by air cargo, yes or no? The nature and the value of the goods that are carried, of course, because 1 kilo of pharmaceuticals would not have the same impact as 1 kilo of fashion goods, for example, and the type of flows between export, re-export, import, and transshipment. So if I take transshipment as an example, usually we're talking about big volumes of transshipment. So it may drive the employment, but it may not impact the local economy that much more because basically the cargo is just passing through. So the point here is that this is a way to, start to illustrate the real value of cargo, and it's actually not easy because of the difficulty of sizing the flows, but also the mapping it to the impact on the economy, and that can be quite sophisticated. So instead of that, what we would typically do is look at tonnage, and that's let's say the default measure by which airports would benchmark themselves. Here we have a picture of the top 30 cargo airports in 2020 in terms of international traffic, looking at the size on the x-axis and the growth versus 2019 on the y-axis. And what is interesting here is that there's a big difference. There's quite a spectrum in terms of growth between airports that have seen a positive growth this year of the likes of 10 or even 15%, versus those that have seen a considerable decrease of the likes of 20, 30, or even 40%. And the difference seems to come from the fact that airports that are growing, or at least growing above average, they tend to have significant e-commerce activity and or freighter activity, which have allowed them to capitalize on the current trend. Conversely, those that are declining, a lot of them are actually reliant on belly cargo historically. So as you can imagine, it's very difficult to replace that belly cargo even partially. So freighters have been flying high utilization, but all in all, we see the impact that it has on the airports out there. So like I said, this is the go-to measure or the go-to KPI to look at airport performance in terms of cargo business. But that surely should not tell the whole picture because, well, tonnage is one thing, but like I said, it depends on the nature of goods. If we have 1 kilo of vaccines, that has an immense value to the economy, as you can imagine. This is something that everyone is talking about nowadays, which is the preparation to deliver the COVID-19 vaccines. And here we have an example of two possible distribution methods, whether we are talking about the ultra cold temperature type of vaccine, so the likes of the Pfizer and BioNTech vaccine, which will need direct distribution as much as possible because the temperature requirements are quite strict, and therefore the time requirements are also strict, versus the type of vaccine that would need more conventional freezing temperatures. So that's the likes of the Moderna vaccine. And because the temperature requirements are less strict, we can imagine distribution via a central distribution point. So the point here is that airports have a role to play to help with the planning and the collaboration that is needed to make that end-to-end flow work. So you need to look at it from an end-to-end perspective. You need to understand the capacity both upstream and downstream from the airport in order to make sure that it is a smooth flow throughout the cool chain. And because of that, that brings us to the concept of cargo ecosystem, because each stakeholder itself cannot by themselves sort of do that, especially in the case of vaccines where the margin of error is quite limited. So here, the value of the cargo ecosystem comes to the surface. And we see the role of the cargo ecosystem as to ensure continuous collaboration between the stakeholders. Basically, the cargo chain is only as strong as its weakest link. So you need to make sure that all the stakeholders are sort of working together in an efficient manner. The role is also to look at the pain points. So in the case of the vaccines, a lot of the pain points will happen in transit. So let's say in between the forwarder and the handler, or between the handler and the airline. So that's the importance of looking at it from an end-to-end perspective. The ecosystem is also a platform to support and advocate development of cargo policies, basically helping the regulators see the value of cargo and understand the impact that policies can have on cargo, whether good or bad. And next to that, what is also important nowadays is innovation. So all the emerging trends in terms of digital, in terms of sustainability, as we saw in yesterday's webinar, it's better to innovate in a group rather than each company innovating in itself, because there you see the real value of innovation coming to the surface is when you partner with other stakeholders. And finally, there's a value in of course, doing joint marketing and attracting cargo traffic together, because that is a clear win-win situation for all the stakeholders. So we see the airport as having a central role within that to basically make sure that these objectives are materialized. And lastly, the one thought that I would like to leave you with is what represents a strong cargo ecosystem. So just as we looked at the value of cargo to airports, we must look at the value of airports to cargo, because not all airports have the same potential in terms of cargo and the same the same performance. These are some of the common criteria that we look at in order to assess how a certain ecosystem is performing. I won't dwell into the detail too much, because I know that Thomas will touch on that in his presentation next in terms of air cargo competitiveness. I will just highlight that connectivity and air capacity seems to be one of the most important criteria out there in order to strengthen the cargo ecosystem. And that's also one area that has seen a huge impact this year. So surely to help with the recovery, that's something that we will need to look at in order to support cargo recovery for the years to come. So with that, I would like to thank you for your attention, and just time for me to recap some of the key points we discussed right now. First of all, that cargo can create significant value to the airport and to the ecosystem, and that's in the form of diversification of revenues, but also, and perhaps more importantly, in the form of strategic and economic value. Secondly, why is it important? Well, in the case of strategic value, if airlines take cargo seriously, they will look at air cargo capabilities of airports to inform any decisions when it comes to network, when it comes to aircraft allocation. Do I fly with a narrow body or a wide body? So there we know that cargo can make the difference. But also the economic value, the importance there is that it can help strengthen the business case for any development that the airport can undertake. So we see that, for example, projects to improve the infrastructure or expand capacity, sometimes the airport cannot do it by itself, and you need the government or the regulator to contribute in a way or another. But also for the importance within the airport, because not everyone within the airport organization will understand the true value of cargo. And we are here within a cargo community, so we speak the same language. But sometimes in order to get projects going through, you need the rest of the airport organization to also see the value of cargo. And finally, the other key point we addressed is the central role that airports can play. And even though airports do not control everything within the cargo chain, let's be honest, because it's up to the cargo operators, you can think of airports as a conductor of a very sophisticated opera, where the conductor doesn't play instruments, but somehow has to make sure that everyone plays in unison, and to make sure that the opera is a good opera. So with that thought, I would like to hand it over to you, Céline, for the rest of the program.
Thank you, Soufiane. It was very, very interesting. I think it does resonate in our, in the mind of our speakers. I would like to introduce and welcome Thomas van Hasch from University of Antwerp. Thomas will present the air cargo competitiveness and airports, so it's complementary to what you've presented, Soufiane, and it will be really the good baseline for the next discussion moderated by Stephen. Thomas, the floor is yours. And don't forget also the Q&A section before Stephen is jumping on.
So thanks, Céline, for this nice introduction. As you told, I'm Thomas van Hasch from the University of Antwerp, and more specifically from the Department of Transport and Regional Economics. The last couple of years, we did some research around the air cargo competitiveness and European airports. Just to set the scene a bit, I think we all agree that the relationship between airlines and airports significantly changed the last couple of years, whereas in the past was more or less airports versus airlines. Today also the passengers are quite important. Airports are focusing on non-aeronautical revenues as well, due to, amongst others, the privatization in the industry, some commercialization that took place, but also the increasing importance of the low-cost market. And this puts some competitive pressures on airlines in the first stage, but also on airports. And both were looking for some additional revenues, and cargo was a nice step then. If we look to some selected airlines, we see that cargo really contributes to the total revenue of these airlines. If we consider the Asian ones, cargo make a significant contribution to their revenue. For the European airlines, it's a bit different and a bit less. But if we look into the evolution, we see that it's increasing. For the Americans, the American Airlines and Delta Airlines in the US, it's quite different. Cargo is less important, but that's mainly due to the strong position the integrators have. I'm thinking on DHL, FedEx, but especially UPS, which are really important to consider for the American market. If we consider some trade lanes, we see that the trade lanes are maturing. However, to really make the difference, we have to add value, and this is where the airport can come into play. Airports can really make a difference and can really add value in the transport chain. And we addressed this issue specifically. We were looking into where can airports make a difference, and we defined 4 different blocks actually. The first one is a territory block, where we look into the actual location of the airport. Where is the location, but also is there a lot of demand for air freight, what's the capacity, and things like that. If we then go to the marketplace, we considered the different actors which are present at an airport. We look to forwarders. Forwarders seem to be very, very important for the cargo industry. We considered also the role of the integrators at an airport. We look to some airlift capacity, wide body capacity, as well as full freighter capacity. Then to the operations. Operations seems to be relevant as well. The operational time of the airport, is there a night curfew? Is there not a night curfew? What are the costs, warehouse costs, but also labor costs? Very important as well seems to be the connectivity of the airport and its network, and especially its long-haul network. The accessibility of the airport is addressed as well. And in the last block, the product differentiation, we look to some more, let's say, soft factors. What's the reputation of the airport? How is the airport dealing with cargo? We look to some marketing and business development. And the last one, whether there is specialized suprastructure really dedicated to the cargo market. And we see that in the territory block, it's very difficult for airport management to really intervene. Location is more or less as a given. However, we can really make, as airport manager, make a difference in the product differentiation block. We can really work on our reputation within the industry. We can do marketing around our cargo market, etc. We applied this in a quite growing industry, the e-commerce market, the cross-border e-commerce market, and we looked into which factors are now the most important ones to really attract this cross-border e-commerce market to our airport. And I want to highlight 3 to 4 factors. First of all, it seems to be very important to attract this e-commerce to your airport to have enough land capacity. We refer here to land capacity, to warehouse capacity, I'm sorry. So having enough space to allow for future growth. Second, also airlift capacity is important. Not only full freighter capacity, but also wide body capacity. Why this wide body capacity? To offer you the flexibility and the connectivity and the network at your airport. Finally, and probably the most important one, specifically for this e-commerce market, this cross-border e-commerce market, are customs efficiency. Customs efficiency, and more specifically, the having the ability to pre-clear your e-commerce at your airport seems to be of utmost importance. To assess then the competitiveness of an airport in the air cargo market, we developed this air cargo strategy canvas, which we can apply on different airports to assess their competitiveness. And on a airport product level, on the individual airport, we defined the 4 blocks I introduced you a couple of slides ago. So the territory, cargo marketplace, operations, and differentiation block. It's also important to look to the market more or less, and then we consider regulation, some key strategic products where we think niche markets are the ones that offer the most important growth in the next couple of years. General cargo is still important, but the importance is going down. And then we looked into the competition. What are the main competitors of our airport? We have some disruptors we have to take into account. I think today we have the COVID-19 pandemic, but in the future, climate will be back on the agenda. Digitization is quite important in the industry. And last but not least, we have to take into account also some shareholders' objectives. We have some airports publicly owned, but we have, of course, also some airports that are in private hands. And we applied this canvas on our Belgian airport, our Belgian national airport. And we see for the territory block, for example, that we are quite good. We are in the middle of the blue banana, a quite important economic region within Europe. So our location is quite good. We are okay. We are in between the big four, the flap airports. However, these airports are struggling with capacity. So I think here Brussels Airport can play its role. Considering the cargo marketplace, everyone is there at Brussels Airport. There is a very strong presence of an integrator, DHL. But we have some full freighter capacity. There is wide body capacity, although here we think that we should improve. More is needed, especially towards the US and Asia Pacific. There are a lot of trucking companies nowadays at the airport, so we are good on that. Considering the forwarders presence, Brussels Airport is doing really, really good. There are a lot of freight forwarders present at the airport. If we compare with other airports, we see that we are more or less on the same level as, for example, Frankfurt and London Heathrow and Charles de Gaulle. So we are doing good there. Then we consider the operations. Operations, nothing special to add. We are not doing much better at Brussels compared to our competitors, but we do not have any issues as well. The differentiation block, also here, Brussels Airport is doing a good job, I think. The reputation on the cargo side, especially on the pharmaceutical side, is quite high. Air Cargo Belgium, the cargo community, is trying to make it work, make the cargo community work at the airport, so that's okay. Considering regulation, of course, we cannot make a differentiation between European airports. However, on a local level, I think the noise regulations have to be solved. That's the main issue we have to deal with. The focus of the airport on e-commerce is good, as well as on the perishables and the pharma. Brussels Airport is really a pharma hub within Europe, with headquarters of, amongst other, Johnson & Johnson, Pfizer, and GSK. That's good. In general cargo, but that's not different from all the other European airports. Is a bit going down or growing less fast, so that's okay. And our main competitors, or the main competitors we identified for the airport, are Munich in Germany, a quite comparable airport, but since a couple of years also a quite important hub for Lufthansa, with significant number of long-haul routes, which is a challenge for Brussels still. Of course, closer to home, we have Liège Airport. Liège Airport is important to consider as well. And still the big four are important. We see more long-haul routes at these airports, which is a challenge. However, these airports are dealing with their capacity. At Brussels Airport, we have to admit, and we have to say that cargo will always come on a second stage. The main priority of the airport is still the passengers. If you look to the shareholders' objectives, Brussels Airport is privately owned, or mainly privately owned, so I think we are good there. The airport is cash flow growth driven, which allows for future growth, probably after the pandemic, of course. And I think, the disruptors are mainly today for everyone, the pandemic as well, once again. Climate change, digitization, changing business models, and the one I want to highlight here is, of course, local politics. Just as a conclusion, and to be able to go quickly to the panel, I think we all agree that air cargo really started to play a major role in the aviation industry, not only for airlines, but also for airports. Airports can really make the difference, and the role of airports really increased into the market. It's important to assess a broad set of factors to assess the airport competitiveness. We cannot just look to some factors or just to the cargo throughput. And of utmost importance are really the forwarders or integrators' presence, the airlift capacity, whether it is wide body capacity or full freighter capacity, the network and the connectivity, especially towards the Asia Pacific and the US, is absolutely relevant. And our reputation within the market is also a key factor to consider. Last but not least, but we cannot forget this one, working and having a good IT system to plug in and provide seamless data exchange and probably also track and trace, but this is more on the level of the freight forwarders, of course, but especially this data exchange is really important to make the whole system work. So that was it from my side. I think I will give the word back to Celine.
Thank you, Thomas. Very interesting. I think, Stephen, you have a good baseline to start the panel discussion based on those two presentations. So the floor is yours, together with Ilva, Patrick, Vivian, and Stephen, the other Stephen.
Thank you very much, Celine. Yeah, thanks for the two presentations. I think they gave indeed a very good context and were nice to set the scene. Sophia, next time I'm going to put you last and not first, not because you have been taking too much time, but you have answered half of the questions I was going to ask. So that is going to make it more difficult for me, but thanks for the presentation. I've asked all the panelists to have an open focus, an industry focus, not too local or only own backyard, so we can really use the industry expertise. And before starting the panel, I really regret we cannot have a physical event for several reasons. But one of the main reasons now, if we would have had a physical event, I would have been able to force my colleague Stephen to pay us champagne to celebrate the 1 million ton mark you had yesterday. So only a congratulations on this one. And I still keep that champagne for the next time if you're okay with it. Perfect. Let me start with the easy question. And I think it was already mentioned a few times. And I think there were also two questions already from both Sam and from Gerald. Do airports give enough attention to cargo in general? That's the first part of the question. Second part would be, do you see an improvement? Do you feel that the COVID pandemic is suddenly putting cargo higher on the agenda? And three, if so, do you think it's going to be sustainable in the sense a long-term higher place on the agenda, or is it more opportunistic now that cargo makes money? Let's do it for a while and then we go back to the old days. And again, Stephen, I know it was mentioned, cargo versus passengers. You are not bothered with passengers. So especially for you, use your expertise and your knowledge of all the airports in the world that you know. And why don't you start?
Okay, well, thank you. Where do I start? Well, I'll start with my case. In my case, we do give enough attention to cargo. I think some members of the board think we don't give enough attention to passengers, but that's a discussion for another evening. But I actually think that that cargo is not given enough attention overall, looking at the industry, and you're absolutely right. I mean, I think now, finally, I would say finally, cargo gets the attention that it deserves. I mean, and I'm not gonna emphasize too much on what's happening today, but I think the vaccines now, the PPE materials before over the last months, we all knew it. I mean, the 126 participants in this event, they knew it, but I think maybe our CEOs and our boards, they didn't, but now they are much aware. So now there is a lot of attention, and is it going to be lasting? Well, I definitely hope so. I think this is not something that should be looked at as an opportunistic thing to now quickly make some money in cargo, but I think, and also Sofian showed it in his presentation, there's a lot more to it than the financial. It's also about strategy and economy of the region, and for the moment it's about public health, and what could ever be more important than public health. So I do hope it's lasting, but I'm not sure. I mean, we all know that companies tend to have short memories, and I just hope that 5 years later we're not going to be back at as usual. That's really what I hope for.
Yeah, okay. Thanks a lot, Steven. From hope we cannot live. So let's come back later on a discussion. What can we do to avoid it going down again? So I'll do that one later. So Patrick, what is your feeling on this topic?
Well, trying to avoid the narrow view here. For us, obviously, in Brazil, cargo is at our airport represents 20% of the revenue. That's because of the Brazilian model. Actually, it represents 20% of the revenue without landing fees, without real estate, etc. So it does get the attention here. That's sort of part of the nature of the business. No? I think turning your question a little bit around, if you don't mind, is the rest of the supply chain paying enough attention to the airport? I think, or does the rest of the supply chain see the possibilities in working together with the airport? For example, here we have built some really strong relationships with some freight forwarders around incentives and improving the efficiency of their flows. And those that have understood that they can get a lot out of the airport, they actually have stronger customer relationships. They can offer their customer a better service. And then you see the vast majority actually doesn't understand fully the value of working with the airport. We have the airline is our customer, the shipper is our customer, the freight forwarder is our customer, and the ground handler is our customer. So we actually see every little part of the supply chain. We know every bit of performance, from the freight entering here to leaving, who pays what. We have more transparency than anybody else, and I think the industry would gain a lot in working more with the airport on specific, even winning business. It's very rare that a forwarder comes to us and says, I'm taking part in a tender for a big pharmaceutical flow and wants to involve the airport. Yet he could actually negotiate with us rates and bring those into the tender. And it doesn't happen yet, So it's a sort of the mindset, at least here, where the airport is much more involved. We handle ourselves, obviously, like we're a monopoly handler. So, but I think that's something that when you asked about this, immediately I think about, okay, yeah, we pay attention, but do the others. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, thanks. Ilva, how do you look at it? You manage several airports and you have a very good view also on the whole Scandinavian view. How do you look at this? Do you believe that not only at your airport, but in general, airports do what they need to do as cargo? Or as Sam nicely said it in his question, or are we still too much that landlord not really playing a role?
I think that lately everybody's talking about the air cargo, and coming from a small country in the northern part of Europe, connectivity and logistics is really important. So even within our own company, it has put air cargo on the map, and also the cargo community, and also the export companies, the import companies. It's really put cargo on the agenda, and that might be the only good thing with COVID-19 so far. So let's hope it will continue. But I have to be honest that I have to struggle myself within the company to have the the attention that air cargo is worth. And I have had some good help now with the COVID-19 to the agenda.
Yeah.
And we have also had some media coming to the airport, seeing what we are doing, meeting other actors at the airport. Since we are a logistics provider, we only have the infrastructure at the airport, so we collaborate with a lot of other companies. And I think that it has shown that the cargo community really stands up and do their utmost when we are needed. And I hope that that is appreciated and that it will pay attention to our business and that more people would like to work within logistics in the future.
Yeah, thank you. And we have to be careful indeed, because if we are saying it too often that COVID is really doing a good job for air cargo, people are going to start thinking that we are behind it, and we're going to have some of these theories saying the air cargo industry did it. Vivian, when Sufjan was showing the different slides, and with all the airports and the growth, and I was looking and I said, why is Hong Kong not on that sheet? But then I saw that you were like completely on the right, so too big to be in that field. So you are clearly working at an airport that takes cargo very important, and cargo is very important. But as a handler using the airport, and also with all the colleagues you talk to in general, handling agent, I think, are a very good example. Are airports doing enough for handling agents? Are they doing enough to support you to take care of cargo?
I would say in Hong Kong, we are lucky that the airport authority are also providing good support, because we share the same vision that everyone want to position Hong Kong to be, the an air cargo hub. So that's why, and there are a number of different initiatives maintaining our status. So this year, but having said that, I will also say that in the past, when the passenger are the focus, we also see that even though everyone claim air cargo is the key, but we can feel that in reality, whenever there's some operational issues, and the priorities is often given to the passenger. But I think this year we clearly see that whenever when those passenger requests are now seduced, then it really facilitates the continuous growth of air cargoes. So some good example is the freighters, and they keep adding frequencies, so there's no blockage for them, keep adding. And also for the ad hoc charters, we do experience a lot of ad hoc charters, and in particular for the e-commerce, the Double 11, we just passed that festival. So we see that with such facilitation, we have much greater potential of growing the air cargo further. So I also hope that after the COVID, and those facilitation and accommodation will continue.
Okay, thank you very much. Sufjan, we are talking about the growing importance of cargo and how airports are taking cargo more serious. But at the same time, recently, we have seen some airports giving their cargo department a different position in the structure, even more down in the organization, so less visible, which sounds more or less contradictory to what we are saying here. Do you understand that strategy? Do you think it is possible, or do you think it's a strategic mistake? Or is it because of the type of airport that they can afford it and that they are big enough, or they have a strong community that takes more care of business? How do you look at it from a strategic point of view, if you were a consultant to them?
Thank you, Stephen. It's an interesting question, but I have to say it's also a difficult question, of course, because on the one hand, you would think that these airports have many cargo projects ongoing for years, and so there's a certain stability that will carry them through the years to come. But on the other hand, we know that perhaps the years to come will not be the same as the years we just experienced. We had it this year with all kinds of flexibility needed to carry the PPE goods, and now the vaccines. So actually, given that the market is not stabilizing, we can foresee that there's going to be a degree of tactical involvement needed to make sure that it flows well in the coming years, because we know that capacity is not going to come back next year, at least not to the same extent as it was in 2019. So it's hard to justify that, we cannot say it's business as usual, of course. So that's the two forces happening right now. On the one hand, building on the experience that these airports have had over the years, and on the second hand, the ability to be tactical. I've seen airports that had a whole cargo team looking after cargo. I've seen airports that had no cargo team looking after cargo, with various levels of success. But as the people in this group know, that cargo is a people's business. So you need those people actually to make cargo work. You need the know-how. So what is important for these airports is that they don't lose the know-how, they don't lose the experience, because it's going to be needed in the years to come.
Okay, thank you. A very diplomatic answer. Thanks for that. We are also talking about air cargo communities, and this is also something we have been seeing more often in the past few years. For an airport operator, are they an asset? Or is it something that we feel basically an airport should do, but because of our limitations, we are like more letting it happen by the community? Or is it like a 1 + 1 is 3 situation where you really strengthen each other's position? How do you look at it, Steven?
But I think it's like something that has to come natural. I think it's the importance of the cargo community has clearly come with the changing requirements and also with the specialization. I mean, I saw in Thomas' presentation as well, general cargo is going down, niche markets is going up. I don't think that's entirely correct. I'm just thinking there is less general cargo because we consider now niche markets having special requirements where we before just put them under the general cargo. And with these niches, there is a need for cooperation. I mean, in perishables, it is clear that we had to involve phytosanitary, that we needed cool facilities, that we needed specialized truckers who can do it. We saw the same in e-commerce, other actors, but again, the need for cooperation. So I think it's something that has grown into us. And I do think it's also for the airport, it's an opportunity to take possession of what is actually happening at the airport. I think, as you mentioned, Sam's question, is it only be a landlord or are we going further? Well, I think the additional requirements of niche markets and the solution for that is really community and cooperation. And I think there as an airport, we can move from being a landlord or a facilitator and move into something where we can give an added value to the companies who are active on our airports. So yeah, I think it's something, it's an opportunity, it's a challenge, but that comes with every opportunity. So I really see it as an opportunity to grow really into our business, to enable us as cargo management teams of airport to do more than what we did before.
Okay, thank you. Ilva, also from your side, because I also know that you have been very active also in the community. Do you feel that this kind of ecosystem, as Sufjan described it, that this can be like a natural thing done by the airport on a ad hoc basis? Or do you also feel that a more established community is more interesting and gives more opportunities, or is it the role of the airport?
I think it's definitely the role of the airport. And as you said, we just had started the community in Air Cargo Sweden. So we were just to make it more like an organization. But then the COVID came, and what we see now, and my concern is that many air freight companies, even though there is quite a lot of cargo, they have let people go. And some people are on furlough, so they don't work full time. So to have the attention and the time from the members of the cargo community to be engaged at this point, I find that hard. I hope that is only for now, because I don't want us to stay in here and now situation, but to look further down the road and see what happens. But my concern now is to have the other ones engaged and the commitment from the cargo community due to the tough times for the companies.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Patrick, and same question, but slightly different. Do you have challenges today at the airport where you say, if I had a very strong cargo community, I would be so happy because they would be able to solve it, because as an airport operator, this limits on what I can do?
I think the airport community for us is important in shaping the sort of the regulatory future of our business, which is developing very quickly here in Brazil. So in that sense, it's critical. But for us also to throw a number out here, for us, it's the community approach has been absolutely critical in improving our performance. And I give you a number. We started this is a concession here, and we've reduced the dwell time of cargo by 45% in the first 3 years. And that has nothing to do with us. That is, we put the freight in the warehouse, and we hand it over to the customer, and we do our best to store it safely. But you need to work with customs, with the farmer regulator, with the agricultural regulator, with your airlines, etc. There's so many factors in improving this number, and that only worked as a community. So nowadays we have what we call a facilitation forum that happens once a month, and that's absolutely critical to maintaining that kind of performance, because it's you can only do it as a community. I mean, Brazil obviously has its own story in terms of customs and so forth, so the community is critical in maintaining that kind of efficiency in the cargo handling business.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Vivian. A question that we had from the audience, and it also has to do with the role airports can play. Do you believe, as a handling agent or an operator at an airport, that airports can play a much more active role also in things like asset sharing, or for example, the digital community systems? How do you look at it as from a handling point of view?
As a handler in Hong Kong, we do have our own system, and there are also different parties in the Hong Kong airport. But I agree that the airport authority or the airport can actually lead all those initiatives. And this is exactly what's happening in Hong Kong. A few years ago, and the airport authority got the initiative of leading, a number of operators in Hong Kong airport, including Hato, to join for the IATA CEIV certificate. And recently, we also form a task force on the vaccines. Why I think this is important, because I think for attracting or establishing a cargo hub, it's not only the operator are fighting for it, but it is the location, the airport as a location, that we keep attracting the cargo to this location. Then all the operator will share with that pie. So, and that's why I think in Hong Kong, we do consciously make a consolidated efforts on launching different initiatives with the common goal to attract the cargo to Hong Kong. And then we will then, as an operator, we will work out those solutions for the cargo.
Okay, thank you very much. And to continue maybe on the digital, Stephen, and a question for you, because I know that you guys have been very active in it, and you have been very vocal on it also when it comes to infrastructure, and that you see it as part of a basic infrastructure. These new community systems that go beyond the pure data and messaging, community driven, or do you really believe this is an airport's responsibility to be at least the driver behind it?
I think it needs the airport. It needs a driver, and let's be honest, who is gonna be the driver for the local community if the airport does not take it upon it? So on the one hand, I am 100% convinced that you really need it, and on the other hand, I believe that we are the ones, we as airports are the ones who have to take the first step and allow all the service suppliers, all the members of the community to plug into it. So yes, I see it as a part of the basic infrastructure, just as a warehouse or an aircraft parking or an entry road or whatever else. We need customs, so we make sure the customs have all the facilities they need to do their job, and we need freight forwarders, we need cargo to be moving, so we need to make sure they have all the facilities to make it happen. And I do believe that the digital infrastructure is part of these facilities, that they need it happen. So yes, I think it's as the driver, you need to invest, and I believe that that we're only at the very start of it. I think we still have a long way to go in this, and this is also something that we learned over the last months. You're right, I've been very vocal about it, but I have to be very honest, I had no clue that I thought we were running a 100-meter race, and I thought we were somewhere halfway, but actually the shot has just rung, and I'm not even out of the starting blocks. Really, if I look at how long the race is to go where we should go. So yes, we need to keep investing in it.
Yeah, thank you very much. Patrick, one of the questions we got, I have to stay seated not to answer it myself, so I'm going to throw it back. The development of freight operation depends on the development of the airport facilities component. So the basic goal is airport managers must support airlines. Is that so to develop air cargo, do you think that airports should be more focused on supporting directly the airlines, and that is going to facilitate the growth, or do you see it differently or bigger? Or because for me, if you say airlines, on one hand we have the cargo communities, which are much wider than only if you want to grow the business, what are the elements you play with? What do you think are the key elements?
If I want to play okay, well, that's a different question altogether. No? I think if I want to grow the business, I have organic growth and I have market share growth. No? In the past years, we have been able to grow quite a bit in terms of market share. We compete with airports in the vicinity in a sort of triangle of 500 kilometers. And there we compete on quality, we compete on efficiency, we compete on value-added services, and we compete on price and incentives. And there, that may involve the shipper, that may involve the freight forwarder, and that may involve the airline. But you have to work all of those in order to make it happen. So I give you an example. We won a flow this year, which actually involves us working with a with a freighter operator, with the freight agents, and with a consignee in making that happen. And so I think you need to work with the airline, and you need to look at things like landing fees and offices and so forth, depending on the maturity of the business and who you're talking to, and whether it's whether you're talking about bringing belly freight or whether it's a dedicated cargo carrier. But it's not just the airline. You need to involve the whole supply chain here and try to work that in your favor. I don't know if I've asked the question. So.
Yeah, thank you. Because that goes back a little bit. I think Sufjan said earlier. It's that being the conductor of the orchestra that makes the best music, and it's not just one instrument that is the best one. It's the total orchestra that is going to be making the difference. I agree with you. Yeah.
One observation on this, like when you're a conductor here, it's more like a bossa nova or samba ensemble, But if you're doing this, I think one of the things that often is difficult for the shareholder to understand is how long it actually takes to bring these things to fruition. And because you're playing so many parts of the entire transport chain, but if you do it properly, then it can happen, you know. But it can easily take the airport 2 years to bring a big pharma flow over, you know, like and claim that yes, we had a big hand in this. So those complexities are not so understood.
A lot of people in our industry, but in general, already said that COVID is not that much of a game changer in many things, but it will speed up processes already happening. And I think, for example, home working, suddenly we are used into something that was going to take forever. Digitization is speeding up thanks to COVID. So I think we agreed that cargo is important for airports. Airports are not yet doing enough for cargo, but that it's very high on the agenda. So let's go back to that first question. And I'd like to hear from everybody, and also towards Tiaka, because maybe this is something that we should take up. How can we make sure that when we go back to the normal life, that those who are today paying attention to cargo are suddenly gone again, and that we, like Ulva already said, we are struggling again at all airports to keep cargo high enough on the agenda. How do we make this sustainable, that attention, that spike we are now seeing? What would be tips? What could we do as companies, as individuals, as Tiaka? So any feedback and comment on that one is welcome. And I'm going to ask the question to all panelists and including the two speakers. So I'll start with you, Ulva.
I think one good platform is the new beginning of Tiaka, where we can gather a lot of information, a lot of exchange in the business. Our focus is also very much on sustainability. So I think we shall work together as a community to make air cargo more sustainable. That's very high on the agenda, at least in our country. And it makes companies to dare to use air freight. I think that is very important. It's also important that we find people that would like to work within the logistics, that were new people coming in, not only from the business, but also from other companies, giving us more resources and information and new angles on our matters. I think that is also very important, but also to continue every now and again and always to talk about air cargo within our own companies, because it really needs to be higher up on the agenda in many of our companies and associations.
Thank you very much. Vivian, what would be your ideas to keep air cargo higher on the agenda and go to a new level in future on a higher level?
In my field, I think one thing that the COVID-19 and bring up will be speeding up the e-commerce. It's already booming, but then after this COVID period, I'm sure that the e-commerce will continue to grow. And coming out of it, and also what will be addressing the need for air cargo will be a common platform, and also the data transparency. I think that's what the customers will be required. But as an industry, I think we've been talking about, you know, transparency, data, and common platform, but it's still not yet there. So I think from Tiaka's perspective, or as a consolidated effort from the community, I think we can work harder and on sharing the platform. At the end of the day, air cargo is, you know, is a network build global. It's a global network in my view.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much. Patrick, what would you suggest as a few tips to make sure that post-COVID, people still talk about cargo the way they do today?
I think there are two things that sort of worked for us, and I think I would keep on doing is, I think one, you need to know your numbers. You know, you need to know what's your contribution to the local economy. We for example, we contracted Oxford Economics here last year to evaluate the impact of the airport. It's crucial if you want to influence political stakeholders and others, you know, in helping you improve infrastructure. So really understand this. And I think the other thing that works really well is storytelling. You know, like we have such, I give you an example. We have a customer in the mountains here that is one of the largest engine repair facilities in the world, GE Selmer. They bring in 500 engines per year on air freight, plus tons of spare parts. They support the local economy in the mountain area of Rio de Janeiro, 2,000 jobs and many suppliers, direct, indirect. If you can tell that story, you have politicians' attention right away, in helping you improve infrastructure, in repairing a bridge because the trucks are having a problem passing there and so forth. I think that is really key. And in air cargo, we have so many great stories that capture the attention. I often find the politicians find it easier to follow a cargo story than a passenger story. And I think that's something that I think works very well. And you have to think about this, find those examples, give them a lot of color and numbers, and then use them.
Okay, thank you. Steven, any ideas from your side that we can do as TIACA next year?
But I think that the network is the perfect example, as Vivian said. It's I mean, we're all saying of what can we do in our airport and what can you do in your airport and in my community and in your community. But let's be very honest, if my community works very well and the destination community doesn't, then in the end we didn't do what we were supposed to do all over the business. So I think this what we are doing now, meaning preparing for whatever, well, doing the PPE materials and now preparing for the vaccines, is really the time to say, look guys, let's not compete, let's not try to say I'm better than you and my system works better than you. It's about public health, and it's about cooperating, because very honestly, I live in Hong Kong, my mom lives in Belgium. If I can get a vaccine from Hong Kong to Belgium to her, I couldn't care less through which airport it moves, as long as she gets that vaccine in the right condition as soon as possible. So I think this is also something in the future. Keep developing these networks. TIACA has an important role. ACI, well, I'm happy they sponsor this session, because it means ACI also is seeing the light about the importance of cargo.
Steven, I know they support the session. I'm not really sure if they sponsor it, but I will double check that one as well.
Okay. Well, if they don't sponsor, they should. So maybe it's a hint rather than a fact. But okay. But I really believe that going forward, we just have to think back of this moment. I mean, for the moment, the whole world, literally the whole world, is looking at us as the air freight industry as a whole to get going again. And well, I think that whenever that has been forgotten in some boardroom 5 to 10 years later, we just have to, you are recording this, so we just have to restream this this session, and there we go.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. And by the way, we are indeed talking to ACI to see what we can do more and better in future, because they do feel more than ever the importance of air cargo, and they also recognize TIACA as an important stakeholder that could support them on that one. So that was something that will come back next year anyway. And then Thomas, from your side, from a bit outsider, how do you look at it?
Academics are good in summarizing things. I think it's all about 3 elements. Sustainability. I don't think we can sell anything in the future without do it in a sustainable way. So sustainability is one thing. I think digitization, it's quite often explained here during the panel. It's all about digitization, which can bring transparency. And last but not least, collaboration. I think the aviation industry is an international industry. Everyone has to deal with each other, and I think we have to collaborate with each other to really put air cargo on the agenda everywhere. So I think these 3 elements are key in the future.
Okay, thank you, Thomas. I don't know if you did it on purpose, but you almost described the vision and mission of TIACA. So thank you very much for that one, because this really fits. Sofiane, the last word for you. How do you look at the airports, airport communities, and what we can do to keep cargo high on the agenda?
Well, what can I add to the great points already mentioned by the panel? But let me mention perhaps just a couple of things. One is awareness, and I like the way that Patrick phrased it. There's a quantitative aspect to it. There's a qualitative and a storytelling aspect to it. We speak about the contribution to revenue and percentages, but what is, how much is cargo being discussed in airports board meetings? That's maybe an interesting aspect to look at. So do we have the right representation there? And the second one would be innovation, because airports are busy with all kinds of innovation programs, a lot of times focusing on things that are happening within the passenger terminal. Right now is a good opportunity to apply that perhaps to cargo traffic, because you have new challenges in terms of cargo flows, and yeah, this is the time to perhaps use some of these capabilities to help cargo. So that's my 2 points, I guess: awareness and innovation to look at the future challenges.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm sorry for those questions from the audience we did not answer. There were a bit too many, and our time was limited. I really thank the panelists for their contribution, their feedback. I really appreciate it. And I give it back to Celine for the conclusion. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Great discussion. I took lots of notes. I will post that also as a recap. It looks like a good roadmap for TIACA on what we can do to support, to put cargo on the map, to make sure that cargo is seen as an important contributor to airports, and airports are seen as an important stakeholder to the cargo community. So awareness, innovation, collaboration, sustainability, and I think we have a good baseline to continue the discussion we started already with ACI World. So not sponsoring, but supporting this webinar. And actually it started a few months ago. You know, ACI World they have a new director general, and he with him, with his team, and with TIACA, we had already several discussions on how we can strengthen the collaboration, because he's really conscious that cargo is not clearly on the map today of ACI. So it's something that he wants to change, and he was looking at TIACA for that. So more to do and to develop in the weeks and months to come around that. So really, again, great session. The recording will be made available very shortly on TIACA's YouTube channel. And the slides also from Soufiane and from Thomas will be shared. Thank you, everyone. The next sessions are next week, so we have three more. One on COVID vaccines. This is next Tuesday. One on drones for cargo, because we are talking about innovation, thinking out the box, and it's something that Stephen didn't mention also, but the importance of cargo, of airports to become also drone ports. It's also a good economical development and social development that airports can support. So vaccines, drones, and then we end with collaboration. We will have on the 10th of December the last webinar about uniting air cargo, which is really the mission of TIACA, uniting this industry. So have a nice day, rest of the week, and see you next week at those 3 remaining webinars. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.